Not gonna lie, it took me 6 months before I read my car manual. And I only read it because my tire pressures was messing up and I had no idea what to do. But it was only then that I realized the awful news that apparently I'd been locking my car wrong. Yeah, wrong. I didn't even know that was a thing, guys. But yeah, for 6 months, let's get a little thing, I've been pressing the lock button. But apparently, you need to press it twice in order for the actual alarm system to be set off. That was news to me, so word for the wise, read the manual. But I think that the same thing can go in life, in that often I just assume that I do things right because they seem logical. But actually, I think that sometimes this is kind of dangerous, because in doing so, we miss a true security that comes when we go to the Lord and see what his word offers us. Now, based on how secure my car was, I don't want to think about what could happen if I hold the keys of my life too tightly. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today. We're looking through a parable of the rich fool, and essentially we're going to be looking at how we find security when we actually surrender a kind of self-centered mindset and go actually for a God-centered one instead. So this is a little diagram, if you like taking notes, and it will kind of just talk you through how we're going to approach this. So there are 3 different topics that I really want to highlight about where we need to have this transition in our thought processes. So through our provision, through our purpose, and the way we prepare. So before we go any further, let's dig into the word. So if everyone can turn to Luke chapter 12, verse 13, that would be amazing. While you guys are finding that, Luke is basically a gospel, so it's one of the first couple books in the New Testament, and it's where Jesus' life is basically written about. Cool. Hopefully this is a lot more fascinating than my car manual, and hopefully you've all found it by now. So yeah. Cool. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Arbiter just means divider in Greek. Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What should I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? Now this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God." Great. So I guess my first question for you all now, if you could turn to the people around you, is to say, if you had one moment to ask Jesus one question, what would it be? So discuss. Is this really loud? Is this too loud?
Yeah, I think it's all right. I do not know that I have to give the microphone.
What question would you ask?
Do you know what?
I don't know. Probably what do you like most about me? I use it just to find out more about myself.
I do anything about it.
Or am I gonna fun? Or we just keep really hard with you. Literally. Amazing. Whoa. I feel like my voice sounds really loud, so sorry if it is. Sorry if it's not, I don't know. Okay, amazing. So the reason why I asked this question is because this guy in the story that Luke is telling takes this opportunity to ask Jesus about inheritance. And when I first read it, I was like, Flip, I feel like Jesus is a bit harsh in his response. He replies by saying, who appointed me a judge? When, okay, he is literally the ultimate judge. So he has all authority to give judgment. But then number two, also at the time, essentially the Torah law prescribed rules regarding inheritance. So if you're interested, you can read Deuteronomy 21, where it kind of lays everything out. And then the rabbis of the time were meant to interpret that. So they would have got people coming up to them asking about it. So again, why didn't Jesus answer? See, I think the problem here wasn't the question, but it was the heart behind it. See, it was in the man's self-interest which clashed with the context. If we think about the scene here, right? Imagine Jesus is there preaching to all these crowds, and there are so many people, and he's talking about quite heavy stuff, right? He's talking about confession and hypocrisy and having strength in opposition. And then this man, random stranger, just interrupts everything and asks him a kind of petty personal question, which doesn't relate to anyone else in the crowd. It's kind of like if one of you ran up here while there was worship going on and started doing like a karaoke. It shows that this guy didn't understand and didn't connect with what Jesus was preaching about. So when he interrupted, it came off kind of disruptive and inappropriate. And I feel like we can judge this guy, right? I'm sure all the questions you just had were so much better than this one. But actually, I think that I can really relate to this guy. Like, how many times is God just trying to spend time with me, trying to tell me stuff, and I just interrupt with my own wants, with my own wishes, with my own agenda? I think we can get so caught up in the trivial matters of life that we end up putting them at the center, and therefore us at the center, rather than Jesus, who should be. Now, this reminded me of a TikTok video that I saw, and it's kind of random, but honestly, it really stuck in my mind. So I'm just going to play it for you now, if the tech works. If not, you're going to have a great demonstration from me. Should we do it? Okay, I'll do it until it comes on. So essentially, Jesus comes in to this restaurant, sits down. The waiter comes up and is like, Jesus, what can I get you? And he was like, no, I'm just waiting for a friend. Hours pass. The waiter comes up. He's like, are you sure your friend's coming? Hours pass and Jesus is still waiting. And he's like, no, this guy, like my friend, they'll come. And then after ages, finally comes, and then Jesus is like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting all day. How are you? And then suddenly this guy just interrupts, being like, hi, Jesus. So this is going on in work, and kind of like this girl, but I'm not sure if she likes me back. And also my leg really hurts, so can you sort that out? And also just pray for my family, and can you do this, and can you do that? And so on and so forth. And I was like, Flip. Is that what my quiet time sometimes looks like with the Lord? And though that isn't an exact retelling of what happens, I think it's really interesting because centuries after this bit was written in Luke, I feel like this video contained the same heart and the same attitude as this guy who interrupted Jesus. So we're going to try to avoid that, and we're going to do that by going through how we can change our self-centered way of viewing to a God-centered one. So we're going to start off with looking at how we need to see provision in a God kind of centered way. So first of all, we need to view richness as coming from God. This will then stir us to have a grateful and a giving heart. So first of all, in verse 16, it says that the man was already rich before the Lord blessed him with more abundance. And I think it's really interesting because the problem here isn't that it wasn't that this guy had lots. And the problem wasn't that he wanted to save. The problem wasn't that he owned wealth, but that wealth owned him. It's what he lived for. So when he got this amazing amount of blessing, his first thought was how can I keep this? Rather than actually just giving thanks and being grateful. The thing is the Lord is the giver of good gifts. He wants us to steward what we have, but above all, he wants to come first. I kind of think it have you ever done something nice to someone and then you're just waiting for them to find out? It's a great moment when they discover it and they're like, oh, wow. It's kind of similar to the fact that I used to clean my bathroom when I was at home with my family. Every single week I would clean the bathroom, and there was nothing better than them coming to me and being like, Tash, I noticed you did the bathroom. It looks stunning. Versus the absolute soul-wrenching moment of them being like, wait, you cleaned? I didn't even notice. And I think that God's the same. He's waiting for us in excitement to realize the blessings that he has placed before us. So I think now, just really quickly, why don't you turn to the people next to you and just say one thing that you're grateful for, and just say a prayer of gratitude in your hearts, and just recognize that. Okay, one sec. Turn and talk. Okay, I'm sure there are loads, so carry on conversations after the service. Yeah. Great, so next we're going to go on to having a giving heart. And the thing is, God blessed this man with overflow. But the whole point of having overflow is that it's meant to spill out into other people as well. But it's interesting because after this rich man got so much more, he didn't even consider sharing it. In fact, he used so many personal pronouns. I think we have a slide of it coming up, and I've just put in bold some of them. He used I 5 times in 2 verses, and I feel like that's just really impressive. See, a self-centered way of viewing wealth is what this guy had. He was so self-absorbed with his own finances that he didn't think about who else needed it. He didn't even ask God what to do with it. Rather, he asked himself. He was like, what should I do with it? And the thing is, if we shift our perspective that actually everything we have is God provided, and therefore it's ultimately his and not ours, I think it changes how we see it. We actually need to give God the ultimate authority in how we spend our money. It's kind of like if I give you guys £10 each week and you just go out and you splash it on Jaeger bombs or something. First of all, awful choice of drink. But second of all, I feel like that would just be really dishonoring to me who's given you the money. So I'm just brainstorming here, but if God wants to use us to be his hands and his feet, then maybe he wants us to be his wallet as well. And I'm just thinking, how often do I, when God gives me something, actually stops to think, is this blessing for me? Or has God blessed me with this gift because he trusts that I will be a vessel and give it where it's needed? I've never asked that, so I probably should. And I get that most of us here are students, right? We don't have a lot of money. I actually wonder what the sum of student debt is in this room. But God doesn't want us to live life with a poverty mindset. That's not what it is to be daughters and sons of the King. So actually, what are we rich in? What has God given you? Because he's blessed us all with so much and wants us to know that whatever he gives us will be used for his glory. So in other words, what is your harvest? What has God blessed you with? This could be personality traits or resources or practical skills. Are you a good listener? Are you able to pray for others? Are you good at fixing things or finding solutions? For me, I think God has blessed me with positivity. I've got quite a good mindset, and I use it I love giving out compliments, essentially, and I feel like it's something that comes kind of naturally to me. So I'm just going to get you to chat in pairs very briefly again about what is your harvest? What is something that's God-given that you can use for him? Okay, chat. Stunning. All of these points, please carry on discussing them after the service. I'm sorry if I'm cutting some conversations short, but if you found it hard thinking about stuff, don't shy away from it, because I know for a fact that the Lord has blessed you with so much. But by having a kingdom perspective of wealth and knowing where our provision comes from, we can find security knowing that God, our Father, will always provide. Even if, from an earthly perspective, you feel like you don't have much. Cool. So next we're going to look at how we should find security when we view preparation with a God-centered approach. Now, everything that this fool did was for his future. It says in verse 19 that he laid up for many years. That was why he was collecting the grain. See, he wanted to hold on to his wealth and did so by taking planning into his own hands. Now, planning is a great thing, but I think you have to be really careful and really aware with how we view dependence and independence. See, I feel like our society these days, like hyper-independence is sought after, and any sign apart from that is kind of considered as weakness. But actually, like, the biblical truth says the exact opposite story. The Bible is like woven with so many examples about how it's amazing to be dependent on God. So, for example, in Exodus 19, it talks about how Moses is leading the Israelites through the wilderness, and God is providing manna for them, which is basically like this food that's like sweet wafers. But Jesus didn't want them to collect more than the day's worth. So every time they did or they tried to, he would make that food just rot and go to waste. And I think it's really interesting here how they relied on the Lord, and the Lord supplied them for manna for 40 years. So although day to day, they had to rely on the Lord and they didn't know about their future, they, and so can we, trust in the nature of God and who he's proven himself to be, which is faithful, generous, and our provider. So this idea of preparing is great, but not when you're so independent that you find it hard to be dependent on the Lord. So independent, so that you lose dependence on the Lord. And in Luke, in the verse 20 to 21, it talks about this bleak future that this rich fool will have and how his barns and everything that he's relied upon won't go into eternity with him. And so my question to you guys is, well, what's your barn? What are things that you're doing in your own strength, where you're trusting in your own ability? What are you trying to prepare that you haven't surrendered to the Lord? I think it's easy in our context to fear the future. There's COVID, we've had cost of living crisis, job market's really tough. And I think our generation is quite negative. And hence, I think it's easy to slip into a state of almost existential dread about the future. And logically, that makes sense. We see the conditions out there and we're like, right, we need to prepare. We need to do everything we can in order to have the most success when we go out. But actually, I think it's a danger in thinking. So for example, the way I would do this is okay, I have to do this amount of work. I need to get to the library at this time. I need to get my assignment done by this day. I need to get this grade on it so that I graduate with this grade, and then I'll be okay. It's so easy to do, and my planner is just full of my plans, of me trying to plan it out, plan success. But I think working from this place is reducing the power of God. It's going to lead to worry because actually it's giving us pressure that we're not meant to take on ourselves. We weren't made to do it alone. So for example, over the summer, I left time to do an internship. I was very aware that I'm going to need to start job searching and CV making and that sort of thing. So I was like, right, I need stuff to bulk up my CV. And then I went to the interviews and I was like, okay, Lord, I would love this. But I'm aware that actually I may be more helpful to your kingdom elsewhere. So I'm really just going to be I don't want this if you're not in it. And if you are in it, please make a way, because I would love to. And that's a scary prayer to pray, because actually it's just taking a step back. Turns out I didn't get anything, which hurt, but equally it was so much better knowing that actually if God is our provider, he will open those doors, meaning every door that's shut is an amazing thing. And actually it turns out it's exactly what I needed, because I ended up just resting in the summer, and the Lord was so kind at making sure that's something that I got. But I'm still here, and I have no idea what I'm going to do next. I'm just getting through day by day and just trusting that promise of the manna, that actually God will provide, and that it's okay if I don't know what I'm going to do next, because God is my provider, and that's where my security comes from, because he will not change. Above my desk, I have this Bible verse. You can see it there. And it says, "Why would I fear the future? For your goodness and love pursue me all the days of my life." The thing is, instead of just preparing for temporary stuff like this rich fool did, we should be preparing our hearts, because that's something that we can take into eternity. So I ask you again, what is your barn? Where are you putting faith in your own ability? And in what areas are you relying on yourself? I'm not going to ask you to chat, but just think about this. Just bring it to the Lord, and just think, have I surrendered them? Great. So finally, we're going to shift to the last point, which is the need to be God-centered when it comes to our purpose. Now, this guy in this parable says to himself, it says in verse 19, "I'll say to myself, take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." See, his purpose in life was self-indulgent, and it was to take life easy. And in Greek, when you read the words myself, it's translated to my soul. So essentially, he's saying his sole condition is to please himself. And it's so easy for us just to instantly dismiss that, I do so many things not to serve myself. But actually, if someone listened to my prayers and my prayer life, would they think that I'm at the center of my life, or that God is? See, believing in God isn't about elevating your life in a way that society may consider it. Rather, it's about finding that deeper purpose. And it's not always going to look like an abundance of stuff. See, the parable ends by saying, being rich towards God. Now, what does that look like? It means chasing after God as your true treasure. It means putting him first above everything else. Is this what I do? Is this what you do? Do you chase after God number one? I've been thinking about that a lot this week, and I have to say, I think there are a lot of idols in the way for me. I think I have a problem when it comes to prioritizing socializing and spending time with friends above the Lord. Like we're called to be a part of a community, but we're not called to put that before God. And I think it's really helpful to ask yourself, like, why? Why do you have these idols? And I think for me, a lot of it comes from FOMO. It comes from caring about how people perceive me. And I kind of think that this may come from me being a younger sister. So I always grew up like wanting to be included and wanting to be valued and yeah. But I don't think that changes the fact that actually fear of God should be greater of fear of man and FOMO as well. That is our purpose, to love the Lord, to walk with him. And we can find so much security in this purpose because it does not change. So what idols do you need to pull down? What are things that you're doing that you find security in that come before the Lord? And I say this because we're surrounded by people who idolize different things. You know, hurry and performance and celebrities and their goals and their ideal lifestyles, their relationships, the list goes on. And how practically are we going to address these idols this week? I want you just to think about one way that you're going to try to address it. I'm not sure what that would look like. Maybe being on your phone less or listening to worship song when you're walking to the library. I think for me, it's going to be prioritizing having one-on-one time with the Lord, even if that means sacrificing work or sacrificing time with others. But my main thing that I will say is share what you're planning with someone. Get someone to keep you accountable. Even put a reminder on your phone so that you remember halfway through the week. Think of this car key, right? Remember that you cannot do it in your own strength. That actually, logically, I can do what I think is right, but that's not how it works with the Lord. You need to surrender anyway. So those are the main points, and there'll be a summary up there, but I just want to say, like, you guys may be sitting here being like, put God at the center. Tash, I know that. Like, that's basic. But actually, I know it's a lot harder said than done. And it's okay to get frustrated. It's okay if you feel like you're going back. I just encourage you, think of a pip of a nectarine, right? It may be a bit random, but I think that if we think about how long it takes for this hard shell to develop and to be that firm center in that fruit, it doesn't happen overnight. And just remember me beautifully demonstrating and acting out that little scenario at the start, that actually God will wait for you. God's not going anywhere. He's not in a rush. And this is where our security comes from. The fact that his affection is constant. See, the rich fool wanted to tear down the old barns and make new ones. God's not in that line of work. He wants to restore us. He wants to renew us. He's okay with our weakness. In fact, he's waiting for you. He's waiting for you for every single time you glance his way. He sees every movement of your heart towards him, even if it's small. Every slight bit of effort you put in to living for him, he sees it and he celebrates it. That's why it's safe to put him in the center, guys. Because he's put you in the center first. That's why he died on the cross for you. Every single day, he's living for you as you strive to live for him. And he died on the cross, so he is literally living at the center of us. The Holy Spirit can come in and work from the inside out. So yeah, I just encourage you now to look at these questions. Ask God, you know what do you want to remind me today? Do you want to remind me that actually God is the provider? God prepares our future, and that God is our true purpose in life. See, the rich fool in Luke idolized money to give him future security rather than surrendering his now to the Lord. Where does our security lie? Well, it lies in the hands of God.